Why were there kids on my dock when I never invited a soul? I stood there frozen. The gate still swinging behind me, my boots dug into the earth. But the world spun, music thumped through the trees, smoke curled off unfamiliar grills, and children I'd never seen before were cannonballing into my private lake. My lake, the very reason I bought this cabin, it was supposed to be my sanctuary, not a public park. And right there, in the middle of it all, flipping burgers on my lawn like it was her kingdom, stood Cheryl Stevens. HOA president, queen of fake smiles and real control. She looked up, spotted me, and her mouth curved into a smirk that said she'd expected me later, much later. I didn't say a word, just hit record on my phone. My hand shook, but not from fear, from disbelief. From the ache of betrayal, of invasion. Of having your peace gutted by someone who didn't even blink while taking it. She spoke first. "You're back early, Mason," she said, like I'd ruined her afternoon. I didn't answer. Couldn't, not until I understood what the hell was going on. My name's Mason, 35. I test polluted soil and toxic waterways for the government weeks. At a time in cities choked by industry, this cabin was supposed to be my retreat. 6 months ago, I found the perfect property, a serene lakeside home with crystal clear water. Nestled in the trees, 2 hours from the nearest smog cloud. I remember the first morning I woke up here. Mist rising off the lake like a secret only I knew, fish gliding silently beneath the surface. The silence so profound it made you feel like maybe the world wasn't broken after all. But now, the water was full of sunscreen and plastic floaties. My dock creaked under strangers' weight. My lawn was trampled by coolers and cheap lawn chairs. It wasn't just the noise that broke something inside me, it was the audacity. What is this? I finally asked, why are there people swimming in my lake? Cheryl laughed, flipping a burger like we were sharing a joke. "It's the community barbecue," she said, "you know, for the neighborhood. And this is the community lake area, Mason, you know that." My heart stopped. What? She looked me dead in the eye. "This is community property," she said again. Slower this time, like I was the one confused. I stepped back, not out of fear, out of disbelief. "I bought this land," I said. "I paid for every inch of it. This lake sits entirely on my property." Cheryl didn't flinch. "Well, that's not what the board believes." The board, of course. The HOA had been a background annoyance since I moved in. I kept to myself, paid dues on time, avoided drama. Cheryl showed up a few times asking casual questions, mostly about the lake, who I bought it from, whether I had it surveyed. I thought it was nosy curiosity. Now I knew better. I glanced around. Every face was unfamiliar. Some people looked guilty, others curious. But none of them looked like they were leaving anytime soon. That's when Cheryl pulled out her phone. "This man just showed up and started yelling at us," she said into it. "He's threatening people. Please send someone." I heard the 911 operator through the phone. She was calling the police. On me. On my property. I backed away, stunned, and dialed 911 myself. "I need to report a trespassing," I said. "Dozens of people are on my private land. I didn't authorize this gathering." The operator confirmed the call and said officers were en route. When I hung up, I realized everyone was watching me like I was the threat. Like I was the crazy one, and maybe that was her plan all along. She looked over at me. Eyes hard now, calculating, not angry, not even nervous, just cold. Cheryl had rehearsed this, every word, every move. Her expression said she'd done this before. But not with me. When the police arrived, it got worse, way worse. Officer Johnson stepped out of the cruiser with the kind of familiarity that made my stomach twist. He went straight to Cheryl. Double quotes, "Mrs. Stevens, you called about a disturbance?" They knew each other, of course they did. Cheryl launched into full performance mode. Tears welled up, her voice quivered. "He just barged in and started yelling," she said, gesturing to the kids still dripping wet from my lake. "We were so scared." Keith, her husband, nodded behind her like a backup dancer. His expression said everything. "I don't want trouble, but I'll follow her anywhere." Officer Johnson turned to me. "Sir, I need to ask you to explain your behavior today." I took a breath, pulled out my keys. "I live here," I said. "This is my home. These people are trespassing." He frowned. "Do you have proof of ownership?" Of course I did. I was an environmental consultant. I kept my land records filed, backed up, and indexed. I walked him to my truck and pulled out a folder with the property survey. "The lake? Fully within my parcel." He looked through it, checking the coordinates, boundaries, and signature seals. His expression shifted slowly from suspicion to realization. Meanwhile, Cheryl was still spinning her story, but now people had their phones out, recording. And for the first time, I saw her crack, just a flicker in the corners of her mouth. Her confidence faltered. "I don't carry paperwork to a barbecue," she snapped when asked for her version of the property lines. "But this has always been community space." But now, she wasn't shouting over music. She was shouting over facts, my documents, my legal rights, when Officer Johnson finally spoke. His tone had changed. Mrs. Stevens, unless you have the owner's permission. This gathering violates several local statutes and HOA event policies. It was like flipping a switch, coolers snapped shut, lawn chairs folded. Kids were hauled out of the water. No one wanted to be part of an illegal gathering, not once the cops were on the owner's side. Cheryl stood still as her fantasy dissolved around her. But the look she gave me, I'll never forget it. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't shame. It was rage. Keith took her arm and pulled her toward their SUV. Her gaze never left mine. She'd tried to take something from me, and she'd failed. In front of everyone, but the part that scared me the most, the way her eyes said, this isn't over. How do you go from lakefront peace to being enemy number one the next morning? I opened my mailbox and felt the first tremor of the aftershock. 3 envelopes, all from the HOA. All violations. I stood there on my gravel driveway, sun rising. Over the lake behind me, birds chirping in the tree line, and I could barely hear any of it. The silence of nature had been replaced with the roaring static of paranoia, of suspicion, of war. Noise complaint at 10 a.m. Unapproved flower planting. Car improperly parked in my own driveway. It was absurd, trivial, petty, but it wasn't about the content. It was about the message. Cheryl had lost control publicly. Now she was taking it back. Privately. She was using the HOA as a weapon, and I knew, in that moment, I was at the center of something way bigger than a barbecue gone wrong. The next few days felt like slow-motion sabotage. I'd walk outside and feel eyes on me from behind curtains. I'd open the community app and see vague, passive-aggressive posts about residents who don't respect our shared values. I wasn't named. She didn't have to. The comments did the dirty work. Some people don't belong in peaceful neighborhoods. It's always the outsiders causing problems. Just sell and move. If you hate the community so much. I hadn't said a word, but suddenly I was the villain. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just retaliation. This was strategy. Make the neighborhood turn against me. Make me feel unwelcome. Force me out without ever raising her voice or breaking a law. If I left, she won, and no one would ever know what she was really after. I nearly fell for it. That night, I opened up Zillow. Drafted an ad, secluded lakefront cabin, high potential, motivated seller. My finger hovered over the submit button, and then I saw the lake, just beyond my window. Bathed in sunset. 20 feet of visibility in water cleaner than any I'd tested in a decade. Trees rustling like soft applause. It hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just a property. This was peace, my earned peace, and Cheryl, she was trying to steal it. Not because she loved the lake, because she saw dollar signs in the reflections. I slammed the laptop shut. No. I wasn't leaving. If she wanted to play games, I'd play chess, quietly, precisely, and I'd win. I stayed up all night with every HOA bylaw printed, highlighted, and spread across my kitchen table. I read every rule, every policy, every clause like it was a crime scene because, in a way, it was. By morning, I had to key discoveries. The HOA bylaws required photographic evidence for any violation to be valid. Cheryl had submitted none. The community policy explicitly prohibited social media harassment even without naming names. She'd broken the same rules she was using to come after me. It wasn't just hypocrisy. It was grounds for removal. I started documenting everything. Every notice, every post, every timestamp. Then I did something she never expected. I triggered an HOA meeting. All I needed were 3 cosigners. Turns out, not everyone in the neighborhood was drinking Cheryl's Kool-Aid. One neighbor said, honestly, she scares me, but I think you're telling the truth. That was enough. She tried to block it. Claimed I was abusing the system. But the bylaws were clear. Any homeowner could call a meeting with proper signatures. She had to give in. The meeting was set for Thursday night. It was the calmest week of my life and the most dangerous because Cheryl went silent. No posts. No violations. No driveway glares. She was saving it all for the room. Thursday came fast. The clubhouse was packed. It felt like a trial. Fluorescent lights buzzing above. Folding chairs creaking beneath shifting neighbors. Whispers swirled like smoke. Some came for drama, others for answers. Cheryl sat at the front. Posture perfect, like royalty. Keith beside her, thumbing through his phone. Looking like a man hoping for teleportation. When I walked in, the temperature changed. Some turned away. Others stared, and just a few nodded. I carried a folder, not a big one, not flashy. Just thick enough to be dangerous. Cheryl started the meeting, her voice syrupy and high-pitched. We're here tonight due to a complaint filed by Mr. Mason, our newest resident. She said resident like it was a curse. I stood slowly. You're right, I said. We're here because I was accused of breaking rules, but tonight, I want to talk about the rules Cheryl's broken. I opened the folder and laid the first photo down. My car. Parked squarely inside my property line, time-stamped, with coordinates. Then the second. My flower. Bed. Labeled and mapped to avoid easements. Aerial drone photo included. Then came the fun part. Screenshots. Of her community posts. Highlighted excerpts from the HOA social policy, specifically the clause about online conduct and defamation. She never named me, I said, but the timing speaks louder than her silence. These posts went up within 24 hours of our police incident. Everyone knew who she meant. The room had fallen still. You could hear people breathing. Then I pulled out the final piece. The HOA's own violation protocol, 7-day notice, photographic evidence, opportunity to correct. Cheryl had followed none of it. She's using the HOA. Not as a guide but as a sword, I said, against anyone who challenges her. Cheryl's face was frozen, her mouth tight, her eyes glassy, but I wasn't done. Every one of these violation notices was issued in retaliation, not in response to actual infractions. Then I dropped the timeline. A printed sheet showing the BBQ incident, followed by a rapid-fire sequence of violation letters, app posts and neighborhood whispers, all traced back to her. You don't have to like me, I said, but you deserve a president who follows the rules they enforce. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mrs. Henderson stood. She was quiet, 70, stooped. A former secretary for the HOA, and her voice cut through the room like a bell. I've watched Cheryl break rules for years, she said. Most of us were too afraid to speak, but now, maybe it's time. She held up a folder of her own. One filled with receipts. Financial inconsistencies, mysterious fees, shell company payments that lined up a little too closely with Cheryl's house renovations. Gasps rippled. A few neighbors whispered. I stood frozen, stunned. Even I didn't see that coming, but Cheryl did. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. This is slander, she shouted. You have no proof this is harassment. She was unraveling. Fast, people pulled out their phones, recording, capturing her rage, her fear. Mrs. Henderson laid her final blow. I asked questions, she said, and last week, I found a note on my doorstep. Stop digging, there will be consequences. She held it up, scanned it in front of the room. That dead silence. Then someone whispered, she threatened her? Another voice, she's stealing from us. I stepped back, letting it all settle. Cheryl tried to regain control, yelling about misunderstandings and clerical errors. But it was too late. The illusion had shattered. A vote was called. Hands rose like wildfire. Unanimous. She was stripped of her title, her authority, her power. She walked out without a word, head high, but shoulders shaking. No one clapped. No one stopped her. The queen had fallen, but as I watched her leave, I felt something tighten in my chest. This felt too easy. Too unfinished. Later that night, as I sat on my porch watching the moon reflect on the lake, a thought crept in like a shadow across the water. This wasn't her end. It was her reset. She'd lost her throne, but I had a feeling she was already sharpening a new crown, and whatever came next, it wouldn't be about votes. It would be about vengeance. Real, quiet, patient vengeance, and something told me she had nothing left to lose. Why did Mrs. Henderson hand me that folder like it was radioactive? Because it was. She held it in both hands tight, careful, like one wrong move would trigger something she couldn't contain. And I swear her voice lowered an entire octave when she whispered, there are things about Cheryl, things you need to see. I didn't respond, not yet. We sat at a tiny cafe 2 towns over, tucked in the corner like we were plotting a heist. But what we were actually doing felt riskier. We weren't planning a crime, we were unearthing one. Mrs. Henderson slid the folder across the table. I hesitated, then opened it. The first page? An invoice. Not unusual until you realized the consulting fee matched Cheryl's kitchen remodel cost to the dollar. Then another tree removal bill to the HOA budget, but the trees that vanished stood in Cheryl's backyard. Then came a pattern, shell companies, vague planning fees, projects that never happened. It was a maze of numbers, and every path led back to her. I looked up, my throat dry. How long have you known? Her eyes filled with something heavier than guilt. Too long, she said, and I kept quiet. Because she made me afraid. That hit harder than I expected. Not because Cheryl scared me, but because she scared someone like her. A woman who'd served in the HOA for over a decade. Who remembered when neighbors used to help each other instead of monitor each other. I confronted her once, she continued, asked about a line item that didn't make sense. She smiled and told me I should retire if the numbers were too complicated. Her voice cracked. Not from sadness, from shame. I took a breath. Why now? She pulled out a second envelope, and what was inside made my stomach knot. A note, scrawled in thick black ink, no signature, no greeting. Stop interfering in things that don't concern you. There will be consequences. She didn't need a handwriting expert to know where it came from. You think Cheryl wrote it? Mrs. Henderson gave me a tired, haunted look. No, I think she had someone write it. That's scarier. I didn't speak for a while, just flipped through more papers. Some were board memos. Others property assessments. Then I saw it, a topographic survey of my lake. Detailed. Labeled. Complete with margin notes that didn't belong on a community record. Potential for commercial tourism. Spring-fed, low turbidity, high-clarity possible bottling application. My breath caught. This wasn't just a random survey, this was a blueprint. Someone had commissioned a professional land study not for community preservation but for profit, and it was hidden in Cheryl's HOA files like a loaded weapon. I looked at Mrs. Henderson. You realize what this means? She nodded, eyes wide with fear and confirmation. This wasn't about control, it was about money. It's always about money. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. The BBQ party, it wasn't random. It was a setup, an attempt to create the illusion of shared public use, a move that could support a future legal claim to convert the lake to community access, or worse, develop it. She'd been trying to establish precedent. If enough people used the lake and nobody stopped them, it might suggest implied easement, and if I hadn't come home early that day, she might have pulled it off. The BBQ, the violations, the smear campaign, they weren't petty power moves. They were cover for something else, a plan years in the making. And I had nearly walked right into it. My heart pounded as I gathered the papers. I need access to the full HOA records, the ones we haven't seen yet. Mrs. Henderson swallowed hard. She'll fight you hard, then let her. We filed an official request 2 days later. As homeowners, we had every legal right to review financial documents during business hours. Cheryl tried everything to block it, claimed certain files were under audit, others misfiled, some confidential, but rules were rules, and Cheryl had built her empire on pretending she followed them. So she had no choice. She let us in, and that's when we found it all. Box after box. Folders stamped with fake project names. Billing records, surveyor contracts for different surveys had been commissioned on my land in the past 12 months, all by the HOA. Each one done by a different company, different angles, different language, but all ending the same way with a glowing summary of the lake's commercial potential. Water rights, filtration quality, seasonal metrics, climate resilience. My lake wasn't just rare. It was valuable. As I scanned the final report, a phrase leapt off the page: perfect candidate for eco resort development. My stomach twisted. This wasn't theoretical. It was actionable, and I was in the way. The door creaked open behind us, loud, sharp, slow. Mrs. Henderson looked up first, and her face went pale. Cheryl stood in the doorway, eyes like frostbite, voice like steel barely held back. What are you doing? Her words weren't loud, but they hit like a gunshot. I turned toward her, calm as I could manage. We're reviewing public records as homeowners during open hours. She didn't blink, just stepped closer. These documents are confidential board business. No, I said, they're not. They're HOA expenditures, and they're filled with surveys about my land. She moved toward the table, hand outstretched, fast, desperate. She reached for the top folder, but I was faster. I yanked it back, spine cracking against the air. Why does the HOA have for private surveys of my property, Cheryl? I asked. She didn't answer. Because there was no answer that didn't expose her. Instead, she stared at me. Silent. Eyes glassy and burning. Then, without a word, she turned and walked out. But the silence she left behind, it screamed. We left 10 minutes later. Files copied and organized. My heart felt like it was ticking too loudly in my chest. And yet, I wasn't scared, not anymore. I was angry. That night, I sat at my desk and flipped through everything we'd collected, notes, invoices, timelines, and I saw it clear as the lake. Outside my window, this wasn't a game anymore. It wasn't about HOA rules or fake fines. It was a heist, a long con, and the target was something I never thought I'd have to defend: my peace. My property, my home. I called in a favor: an old colleague from a contaminated watershed audit. Someone who knew how to run tests the right way. I didn't explain much, just said I needed the lake sampled. Quietly. He agreed. 2 days later, I got the results. One line of text: Mason, this lake isn't just clean, it's exceptional. That's when everything locked into place. The surveys weren't exaggerated, they were right. My lake wasn't just pretty. It was profitable. The kind of resource investors and developers drool over. And Cheryl had known it for over a year. That BBQ, it wasn't a party. It was the opening shot in a war one never saw coming. And now, I was ready to fire back. I drafted a meeting notice. This time, it wasn't about violations. It was about fraud. Community-wide. Documented. Proven. I posted it to the board, submitted the proper signatures, and set the date, Saturday, 7 p.m. But Cheryl didn't respond. No smear campaign, no counterposts, no surprise visits, nothing. It was too quiet, and that was worse, because people like her, they don't disappear, they plan. They regroup, they reload, and I knew without a doubt that. The silence meant one thing, she wasn't done. Not by a long shot. That night, just after midnight, I heard it. 3 knocks on the door. Slow, even, measured. I opened it fast. Blood rushing in my ears. No one. Just pine trees, moonlight, and a folded piece of paper on the porch. I picked it up. This isn't your fight. No signature. No name, but I didn't need either because the ink was still warm and the war was just getting started. Why did that folded note feel heavier than it should? Because it wasn't just paper. It was a warning. A line in the sand drawn in black ink in quiet rage. This isn't your fight. It wasn't signed. It didn't need to be. There's a certain way to a threat that doesn't scream, that doesn't hurl insults or leave broken glass. It just waits, still, calculated, measured, like the knock that delivered it. And for the first time since that barbecue, I realized what I was truly up against. Not a bitter woman, not a power-drunk president, but something worse, someone who had nothing left to lose and everything to hide. I didn't sleep that night. I locked the windows, checked the doors twice, sat in the dark, listening to the forest breathe outside my cabin, and when the sun rose, it didn't feel like a new day. It felt like a countdown. I turned to what I had left, the documents, the evidence, the lake. My lake. The one thing that hadn't turned on me, that hadn't lied. The audit had confirmed it. The water quality, the filtration source, the mineral content. It was rare, priceless in the right hands. A liquid gold mine nestled in a patch of overlooked wilderness, and Cheryl had known that long before I'd moved in, which meant none of this was spontaneous. She'd been planning it, quietly, strategically, from the first time she stood on my lawn just introducing herself, to the way she probed about water access and boundaries. All of it was recon. She wasn't trying to preserve the neighborhood, she was trying to own it. And I had walked into her blueprint. Almost too late. I gathered everything into a folder thicker than a novel: bank statements, invoices, fake projects, land surveys. I even printed the threatening note and tucked it inside. This time, I wasn't going to the HOA, I was going to the community. Saturday night arrived fast. Too fast. The clubhouse glowed like a theater lit for a reckoning. Cars lined the street. Neighbors gathered at the steps in tight clusters, some curious, some skeptical, some whispering. I walked in, folder under my arm, heart pounding like a war drum. The room fell silent. Every seat filled, even Keith was there. Slouched low in the back, a man who looked like he'd aged 10 years in 1 month. Cheryl? Nowhere to be seen. I cleared my throat. Thank you all for coming. No one moved. This isn't about drama, I said. It's about something bigger. Something that affects every one of us. I laid the first sheet on the table, a map of my property, the lake circled in red. This lake? It's private, legally, surveyed, recorded, but someone wanted that to change. Then the next document, a professional land survey commissioned by the HOA, unexplained. Unauthorized. It showed resource values, commercial applications. I lifted my gaze. This wasn't for conservation, this was for profit. Murmurs sparked. Then whispers. Then phones came out. I flipped the next page: bank transfers, invoices, shell company names that matched Cheryl's renovation contractors, community funds. Over $15,000 diverted into projects that never happened. Gasps now. One woman put her hand over her mouth. A man muttered, Jesus Christ, and still. Cheryl hadn't shown. Until the door opened. And there she was, smaller than before, paler. But her eyes still carried that cold glint. She walked in slow, like she wasn't sure whether to fight or flee. This is slander, she said before I could speak. You forged those documents. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Instead, I held up the page with her handwriting scrawled in the margins. Her personal notes: high-value projection, spring-fed bottling potential. If we establish community use, legal precedent may follow. Her face drained. You don't understand, she whispered. I was doing this for all of us. For the community. This was going to fund new roads, a park. You were stealing. I cut in. You tried to take something that didn't belong to you. A man near the back stood. So those BBQs weren't innocent. No, I said, they were strategic. To establish public use of private land. If I hadn't come back early, she might have succeeded. Cheryl looked around, but the room had turned. Whispers now carried names like thief, liar, fraud. Still, she didn't break. She leaned forward. Voice sharp. You think you're better than me? You think you're some hero? I built this community. I kept the streets clean. I stopped the rental properties. You tried to sell out a neighbor for profit. I dropped the final page. The water audit. The lake is worth 6 figures, more with the right permits. You wanted it, so you invented a way to get it. Silence. Then Mrs. Henderson stood, and her voice gentle, trembling, but clear, sliced through the room. She threatened me when I asked questions, left notes, intimidated anyone who didn't agree. She held up the handwritten warning. My eyes scanned the crowd. They believed her. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was them, their dues, their safety, their trust. Someone called for a vote. Hands rose slow at first, then all at once. Unanimous. Cheryl was done. Her power shattered like ice under pressure. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared. Then turned and walked out, heels clicking like gunshots across the tile. But as she passed me, she stopped, just for a second, and what she said chilled me more than any threat could have. "You're not done with me," she whispered. "Not even close." Then she was gone. The next morning, the headline hit the local paper. HOA president ousted amid fraud allegations. By Tuesday, regional news stations picked it up. A news van even camped near Cheryl's driveway. Her name was everywhere for all the wrong reasons. Keith filed for divorce. She stopped answering the door. Her lawyer dropped the defamation suit she threatened me with the week prior, and yet I didn't feel safe, not yet, because Cheryl wasn't just a bully. She was a planner. She wasn't loud. She was quiet. She didn't swing wild. She sharpened, and somewhere out in the dark of the pines, I felt her watching. Waiting. For something. That night, as I walked my property line with a flashlight in hand, I caught a glimpse of something near the tree line. A flicker, a silhouette. Gone in a blink. Just shadows, maybe. But the note on my porch said otherwise, and the chill that clung to my spine told me the same thing. This wasn't over. It had only just begun. Why was a developer's survey hidden inside Cheryl's HOA files? Because my lake wasn't just water anymore. It was leverage, currency. A six-figure secret buried beneath a layer of fake community BBQs and HOA regulations, and I just cracked it open. The night after the vote, the neighborhood went silent. Not peaceful, just quiet in that unsettling, breath-held kind of way. The kind of quiet where blinds don't move, porch lights stay off, and every twig snapping in the woods sounds like a threat. People weren't celebrating Cheryl's fall. They were watching, because when someone like Cheryl loses everything, she doesn't just walk away, she calculates. She reloads, she waits, and I could feel it in the air. Like a storm gathering behind the mountains, low and electric, waiting to roll in. By midweek, my lawyer friend called. He was the same guy I reached out to when Cheryl had threatened me with that defamation letter. She filed nothing, he said, just an empty scare tactic. Then why does it feel like I'm being hunted? I asked. He paused. Then said something I never forgot, because some people don't need to win in court. They just need to make you feel like you already lost. I hung up and sat in my cabin, staring at the glassy surface of the lake outside. She had tried to destroy my peace, using rules, rumors, paperwork, and fear. But it wasn't working anymore. I had the documents, I had the truth, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I had the upper hand. That's when the idea hit me. What if I didn't just protect the lake? What if I turned it into something bigger, something permanent? I reached out to an ecotourism group, one I'd worked with years ago on a wetlands project in Arizona. They specialized in sustainable outdoor experiences, guided tours, kayaking, educational camps, all designed to preserve land while making it profitable. I told them about the lake, the spring-fed clarity, the isolation, the untapped potential. They were intrigued. Send us the audit, they said. So I did, and what I got back blew me away. Mason, the director, wrote, "This place is a gold mine, but not for development. For preservation." They wanted to help turn my property into a protected reserve. One that offered tours, yes, but also research opportunities. Clean water studies, school field trips. No bulldozers, no concrete. Just education. Respect. Legacy. And revenue. For the first time, I saw a future beyond just surviving this. I saw something I could build. Something no HOA could ever touch again. But before I could take a breath, the next knock came. This time, it wasn't Cheryl. It was someone worse, a man in a pressed suit. Tied to tight, clipboard in hand, he looked like someone who never blinked. "Afternoon," he said. "I represent Stonebrook Development." I didn't answer. He smiled politely. "We've been conducting research on this area. There's considerable interest in your land, particularly your lake. We'd like to discuss a potential acquisition." I stared at him, silent. He opened his briefcase, pulled out an offer, low six figures. All cash. "No," I said. He smiled again. "It's a generous offer based on current data." I said no. He stood, adjusting his tie. Like this happened often. Before leaving, he slid a card across the table. "Should you reconsider? Our clients are motivated, but our window is limited." I didn't touch the card, just watched him leave, and as he walked away, a terrifying thought dropped into my gut like a stone. Cheryl didn't act alone. She never did. She wasn't just greedy. She was connected. Someone paid for those surveys. Someone who wanted my lake for more than just weekend swims, and she had been their proxy. Their pawn. Until I pushed too hard and broke her. Now, they were stepping in themselves. Directly. That night, I did something I hadn't done since I moved in. I installed cameras, every corner of the cabin. The dock. The driveway, even the tree line. Something told me I was about to need them 3 nights. Later, I caught it on video. A figure. Just past midnight, walking the edge of the property. Not fast. Not sneaky, just looking. They didn't approach the house. They didn't knock. They just circled the dock. Stared at the lake. Then walked back into the woods. I replayed it 5 times. The gate was familiar. The stance, and when they paused in the moonlight, I saw it. Keith, Cheryl's husband. Alone. Expression blank, but his presence said everything. Cheryl was still in the game. Just watching from behind the curtain. I showed the footage to Mrs. Henderson the next morning. She looked at the screen, then back at me. Do you know what I think? She said, folding her arms. Cheryl was just the first layer. What you're seeing now, that's the real face. What do I do? She looked me dead in the eye. You end it, publicly. Permanently. I called the ecotourism company back. I'm in, I said. Let's draft the agreement. Let's make this real. Saturday came fast. I posted flyers, emails, updates, invited everyone to the clubhouse for a final community announcement. The place filled up like it had during the HOA vote, but this time, there was no fear in the air. Just anticipation. When I stepped to the front, I held nothing but a single folder. Thank you for coming, I began. I want to tell you what happens next. Then I pulled out the contract. The lake and the land around it is becoming part of a long-term preservation initiative. One that keeps it clean, quiet, and safe for generations, I explained. The partnership, guided tours, limited access, revenue sharing with the community. There were no developers. No bulldozers. Just protection from everything Cheryl tried to do. Applause broke out, slow at first, then growing, and then she walked in. Cheryl. Looking like a ghost of herself, thinner, pale. But with that same glint in her eyes, she stood in the back, arms crossed, as I finished my speech. I met her eyes. Held them. This lake is staying mine, I said, and now no one can ever take it. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't speak, didn't move. She just turned and walked back out into the night. Gone. Again. But something told me this was different. This time, it wasn't about revenge. It was about loss. The developers weren't getting what they wanted, and she had nothing left to offer them. She was out, for good, that night. I walked down to the dock and sat at the edge of the lake. The stars shimmered across the surface like embers drifting on glass. And for the first time in months, I felt something return. Not pride. Not power. But peace. Hard. Earned. Scarred. But real. And as I listened to the water lap gently against the wood, I whispered to no one in particular. You tried to turn my sanctuary into profit. You tried to take something you never built, but all you did was make me fight harder to keep it. The wind rustled through the trees, and in that silence, I knew the war was over, but the lesson would last forever. Why did Keith come back the next morning alone? No clipboard, no suit, no HOA badge of honor. Just a tired man with his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets and a hollow look. That didn't quite meet my eyes. Can I talk to you for a second? He asked. I didn't move, didn't say yes, didn't say no. Just stepped aside and let him into my cabin, heart thudding like a slow drumbeat in my chest. He didn't sit, didn't take off his coat, just looked at the floor like a man carrying a secret too heavy for his spine. She's gone, he finally said. Gone where? I asked. Doesn't matter, you won. I just thought you should know. I said nothing. Just stared at him. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his coat. Not another threat, not a legal summons, a map. Hand drawn. In familiar handwriting. My breath caught when I saw the annotations along the lake south ridge. Clearing ideal for road access. Survey markers moved to align with future development line. Potential. Easement pressure point. It wasn't just a plan. It was active. Where did you get this? I asked, my voice low, tight. Keith's fingers trembled. In a drawer. She told me never to look. I looked. I took the paper. The ink had faded in spots. But one thing was clear. Cheryl had been planning to use the HOA to slowly reshape the neighborhood's rules, to legally force access points across my land if I refused to sell. The violations, the BBQ, the social media campaign, they were the opening moves. The end game? A lawsuit to create community access through repeated precedent. If I hadn't stopped it when I did, she might have filed. This isn't just your fight, Keith whispered. I think there were others. I looked up. What do you mean? She had meetings with men I didn't know, not local, not HOA. They'd show up in black trucks, wearing sunglasses. Never talked to me, just her. My stomach twisted. Stonebrook Development. They weren't bluffing. They were building something, and Cheryl had been their key to unlock the first door. But now, that door was closed and she was missing. Keith rubbed his face like he was trying to scrub away guilt that wouldn't wash off. I didn't know, Mason. I swear to God, I thought she just liked being in charge. I didn't know it was about this. He pointed to the map. The lake. Everything. She used people. He said, she used me. I just wanted to keep the peace. That's all I ever did. That sentence landed harder than I expected because in a way, it was true. Keith was never evil, never conniving. He was silent, and silence is what made Cheryl powerful. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. For what it's worth, he said, I think she hated you because she knew she couldn't beat you. Then he left, and I stood there, holding a blueprint to a war that was still unraveling even after the queen had fallen. I spread the map across the kitchen table. Every inch of it was a lie told in ink, property lines manipulated, community used, trails penciled in like they already existed. She wasn't just planning to take the lake. She was planning to erase me from it. I pulled up my laptop and started digging. Zoning applications, land use adjustments, infrastructure requests, and that's when I found it. A filed but stalled proposal dated 6 months before I even moved in, a developer request for preliminary land utility analysis on my coordinates, filed through a third-party LLC hidden in plain sight. But it got delayed because of ownership uncertainty. Because Cheryl hadn't filed the access case yet, she was waiting for precedent for my surrender. And once I signed over or lost through easement, they would have swept in like wolves behind the curtain. The plan wasn't about a lake. It was about water rights. Pure, clean, spring-fed water. Which meant this wasn't just greed. It was infrastructure, profit on a municipal scale. And I'd been living right in the middle of it. I called Mrs. Henderson that evening. She answered on the first ring. You were right. I told her, it goes deeper. How deep? She asked. Far enough that Cheryl wasn't the only one making money off this. I told her about the map, the developer meeting, the buried utility request. There was silence on the line. Then she said something I didn't expect. She wasn't always like this. What do you mean? Cheryl, back when her daughter died, she changed, became obsessed with control. Said the world was chaos and someone had to manage it. Said nobody respected boundaries anymore. I didn't know Cheryl had a daughter. Mrs. Henderson went on, her voice quiet. She was 16. Car accident. Cheryl was never the same. She poured herself into the HOA, said she was protecting the future. I sat in silence. Because even monsters have origin stories. It didn't excuse what Cheryl did, but it explained why she had to win. She wasn't trying to destroy me because she hated me. She was trying to rebuild control in a world that had ripped it from her. But now, she'd lost everything. And somewhere out there, she was watching it burn. Days passed. Then weeks. The ecotourism agreement was finalized. We began setting up limited access areas, permits, trail guidelines. The news ran a story about our community conservation effort. And I didn't miss the irony of those words. The thing she tried to destroy was now the thing putting the neighborhood on the map. But with every step forward, I felt something tightening behind me. A breath not taken, a presence not gone. Then one night, I found it. Not a note, not a threat. Just a box. Placed on my porch. No name. No return address. I brought it inside, heart racing, every instinct screaming. Inside, a photo of Cheryl sitting beside a man in a car. Sunglasses. Dark jacket. Parked outside what looked like a county records building. Dated last week. She was still here. Still moving. And worst of all, still planning. But the message wasn't from her. It was from someone else, someone who wanted me to know. On the back of the photo were 4 words written in shaky ink. You stopped her too late. I dropped the photo, backed away, because the storm wasn't over. It had shifted. Cheryl was no longer the center of the threat. She was the spark. And now, something darker had stepped into the shadows. Why did the man in the photo look familiar? But I couldn't place him. He wasn't from the HOA. Not from the community. Not from any of the developer meetings I'd seen. But something about him triggered a ripple in my brain, like a song you almost remember but can't sing out loud. And that's what scared me the most. Because Cheryl wasn't just disappearing. She was passing the torch, and whoever this man was, he'd picked it up with both hands. I stared at the image for an hour, zooming, scanning, enhancing shadows like I was trying to peel back reality with my eyes. And then I remembered, not a face, a logo peeking out from under his jacket, just barely visible on the car door behind him. Black Ridge Environmental. My stomach dropped because I'd worked with them. Not directly, but I'd audited one of their sites 3 years ago. During a joint government compliance project, they were known for restoration contracts, which sounded noble until you looked closer. Most of their jobs involved buying cheap land with water access, securing development grants, then flipping to utility companies. Under the guise of conservation. It was legal. Barely. But it was slimy. And now one of their reps was meeting with Cheryl outside the county recorder's office. The pieces slammed together like concrete. This wasn't just a developer land grab. This was a corporate acquisition strategy and Cheryl had been the local asset. She'd set the table, prepped the documents, softened the neighborhood. And now that she was gone, they were stepping in themselves. That note on the photo, "You stopped her too late." It wasn't a warning. It was a taunt, a reminder that the storm I thought I ended was still on the horizon. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled every contract, every permit, every water rights filing related to my lake and surrounding properties. And what I found froze me to my bones. A week after Cheryl's HOA title was revoked, a new LLC was formed under the name Echo Springs Stewardship Initiative. The address? A P.O. box to towns over, but the signature matched a Black Ridge environmental officer. They were REBRANDING. Going quiet. And their first move? Petitioning the county to investigate public access history of my lake. They were trying. Again. Different name. Same playbook. Same prize. And this time? No HOA meetings. No neighborhood votes. Just a private company quietly filing paperwork to challenge land ownership based on prior usage inconsistencies. They were coming for the lake. But here's the thing. They underestimated one thing. Me. Because while they've been working back channels, I'd been building something stronger. Not just the ecotourism partnership, but legal firewalls. The day after I found the Echo Springs filings, I drove straight to the county courthouse and filed for a protective environmental trust agreement, sealing the lake as a preservation site tied to educational use. Any access claims now had to go through the Department of Conservation first, and the kicker? The DOE had already partnered with us on the lake's initial audit, meaning we had federal backing. I locked the papers in my safe, feeling my chest finally expand, but then the knock came. 3 taps. Slow. Measured. I opened the door expecting a letter or another box, but this time it was her. Cheryl. Thinner, paler, but very much alive. Standing on my porch like a ghost who refused to fade. She didn't speak at first, just looked at me with hollow eyes that carried something I hadn't seen in her before. Not hate. Not pride. Not power, but shame. I didn't know, she said. Her voice was hoarse, brittle like dried leaves. I thought they were just investors, that they'd build a dock, maybe a few cabins. I didn't know they were trying to buy the aquifer. I said nothing, because what do you say to the woman who nearly cost you everything? She stepped forward slightly, eyes never leaving mine. I was trying to fix something, she whispered. After my daughter, after everything fell apart, the HOA gave me rules, control. I thought if I could build something perfect, maybe the rest wouldn't hurt so much. I let her words hang, not because I forgave her, but because for the first time, I believed her. Cheryl had never been after the money. She'd been after order, and someone else saw that obsession and used it. They offered me a commission, she said if I could get you to sell, they'd back a project in my daughter's name. Her voice cracked. I didn't know they'd come after you when I failed. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for what I knew was coming. Why are you here? She looked away. I came to warn you. Her hands shook as she pulled out a small flash drive. I don't have everything, but I recorded some of the meetings, just audio, just in case. I took it without a word. She looked like she wanted to say more, to explain, to cry, to confess, but instead, she stepped back. And before disappearing down the path, she said something I'll never forget. They won't stop. They never do, not until the water runs dry. Then she was gone. And I stood there holding the ghost of a war still echoing through the trees. That night, I plugged in the flash drive. There were 6 audio files, all scratchy, all dated, but one stood out, a male voice, clear, cold, confident. Once we establish inconsistent use, we push for public access. If that fails, we pivot to eminent domain through a utility shell. The owner won't last through litigation. Nobody does. Then Cheryl's voice, softer, unsure, but he's not selling. Pause. Then the voice again. Everyone sells, Cheryl, especially when they're alone. I stopped the recording. My blood was ice. They weren't just trying to take the lake. They were planning to destroy me in the process, but they were too late. Because I wasn't alone anymore. The community had seen the truth. The ecotourism partnership had teeth. And now, I had their voices on record. Their plan, their arrogance. Everything. I copied the files, sent them to my lawyer and the Department of Conservation. And to a contact at the local news outlet. By morning, the recordings were public. Developers exploiting HOA to seize private lakefront property. Audio leaks confirm covert takeover attempts. It spread fast. Faster than Cheryl's smear campaign ever had, and this time, it wasn't my reputation on trial. It was theirs. Why did the lake look different that morning? Not in shape, not in color, but in weight. Like the water itself could finally breathe again, like it knew the war was over, and maybe it was. The audio files I leaked went viral in a matter of hours. Local news ran the story. Developer plot to seize private lakefront exposed. HOA connection under investigation. Then regional stations picked it up, then national blogs suddenly. My peaceful little lake was on every screen in the state. Not for its clarity or its beauty, but for the fight it had survived. Cheryl's voice made headlines. So did the man from Black Ridge Environmental, the one who said everyone sells, especially when they're alone, except this time he was wrong. I didn't sell, and I wasn't alone. Neighbors who once side-eyed me at HOA meetings now shook my hand in the street. Some apologized. Some just said thank you. Double quotes Mrs. Henderson. Keith left town. And Cheryl, I don't know where she went. No one does. But her name became a cautionary tale, not a villain. Not a victim, a warning that week. The Department of Conservation issued an official cease and desist to all filings by Echo Springs Stewardship Initiative, the fake LLC backed by Black Ridge. Their request to investigate public usage patterns of my lake denied, their push to establish precedent terminated, and their plan to quietly seize a natural resource through legal gray areas exposed. The preservation trust I filed was finalized, stamped, sealed, and now recorded in the state environmental register. My lake was untouchable. Forever. The ecotourism company began setting up field stations. Educational groups reached out, school programs wanted to visit. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled, not the kind of smile you force when cops question your right to exist on your own property. Not the one you wear when HOA letters pile up like guilt in your mailbox, a real smile. The kind that comes from knowing that everything you fought for stayed yours. Not just in paper, but in truth. The morning the news anchor said the word hero, I almost laughed. I wasn't a hero. I was just a guy who wanted to sit by his lake and hear birds instead of engines, who wanted to plant flowers without needing signatures, who wanted to live without being conquered. But maybe that's what made the story resonate, because everybody's got a lake. Something worth fighting for, something no one else sees the value in until they try to take it. And maybe that's when you find out who you really are. A week after the final ruling, I got a call, unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. Mason? The voice said, this is Angela Porter. I'm a producer with Horizon Docs. I said nothing. She continued, we're producing a film about land rights, environmental corruption, and neighborhood power structures. Your story, it's the centerpiece. I almost laughed again. A documentary about this. She went on, we want to film here. Interview you, tour the lake, show people what happens when someone doesn't give up. I didn't agree right away. I told her I'd think about it. Hung up, walked outside, stood at the edge of the dock, and watched the wind ripple across the surface like a signature only the earth could write. I thought of everything. The barbecue. The false violations. The vote. The survey maps. The knock. The box. The photo. And Cheryl, standing in my doorway, broken but unbending, saying they won't stop, not until the water runs dry. But now they had stopped because I didn't. I pulled out my phone. Called the producer back and said, let's do it. 2 months later, I stood beside a documentary crew, microphone clipped to my shirt, sunlight hitting the water just right. They asked me what I'd learned. I told them the truth. Peace isn't free, I said. It's something you earn. Every time someone tries to take it, they asked if I had any regrets. I looked at the lake, listened to the wind. And said, only that I didn't fight sooner. The film premiered online and spread fast. The lake that fought back. It wasn't flashy. Just honest. Real. Human. And somewhere, I imagine Cheryl saw it, not in a theater. Not on a red carpet, but alone. In some quiet place where her name was no longer spoken, only remembered, not as the villain, but as the beginning, because without her, there'd be no story. No protection. No awakening. She was the storm that shook me awake. And I'm grateful, not forgiving, but grateful. Because in trying to tear down what I loved, she made me build it stronger. I still live here. Same cabin. Same dock. Same birds. Some days are loud now. Tours, visitors, kids learning about water clarity and ecosystems. But most days, they're quiet. The kind of quiet you fight for. The kind that tastes like victory and sounds like redemption. Sometimes I wonder if Cheryl really understood what she was doing, not just to me, but to herself. To this place. To everything she tried to control. And sometimes I think she did, because people like her don't fall all at once. They crumble. Quietly. Piece by piece. Until all that's left is the echo of what they could have been if they just let go. The lake is still glassy. In the mornings, still cold and deep and pure. But now, it's also protected, not just by paperwork, but by story. By proof. By memory. By me. And that's the thing about truth. Once you shine a light on it, no one can steal it again. Not with fake documents. Not with lawsuits. Not even with silence. So if you're listening to this, maybe you've got your own version of this story, a home someone wants to ruin, a reputation someone tried to take. A fight you didn't ask for but now can't walk away from. If that's you, don't fold, don't disappear, don't sell your peace to someone who sees it as a resource. Because the strongest revenge isn't fury. It's clarity. And the best thing you can do to someone who tried to break you is show them they made you bulletproof. Thanks for listening. This was my story. Now go protect yours. And if your jaw's still on the floor, you're in the right place. Welcome to HOA Headache Stories.